Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I am Money Mike, and instead of doing a review of Money in the Bank, we are going to talk about, theory. Because that seems to be what everybody's talking about. Was Theory being added to the match a good thing or a bad thing? And there's a lot of different takes, there's a lot of different perspectives on it, and so I just want to kind of give mine here real quick in this video. Overall, Money in the Bank, I thought it was a great show. The women's Money in the Bank match was absolutely amazing. I completely dismissed everybody in that match, including Liv Morgan, who won Money in the Bank and then later cashed in on Ronda Rousey and is now the new SmackDown Women's Champion, because I assume that this match was made for Becky Lynch. I've never been happy to be wrong about a match, because I thought WWE wouldn't push Liv Morgan anymore. Obviously, we have to see kind of where it goes. We know Charlotte's coming back. We know Bayley's coming back. So it's one of those things where it's like, is this moment really going to last long? Is Liv Morgan going to be someone that's going to have the title a few months from now? Is this only going to be for SummerSlam? And then Charlotte or Bayley's going to come in and take the title, whatever. But I think a lot of fans can agree that Liv Morgan was deserving of Money in the Bank, was deserving to become the SmackDown Women's Champion. On the flip side, you have Theory. Now, Theory, if you didn't watch NXT, didn't see his work in the way, I would recommend you go back on Peacock and to watch the old NXT and some of the new stuff with NXT 2.0 as well, in the beginning, before Johnny Gargano left, to kind of see why WWE is going all hands with Theory here, with being Mr. Money in the Bank. I think my biggest problem is you added him to the match last second. That to me is kind of where it drained my excitement for the match. I was excited for the match because you have so many possibilities. Obviously, I think a lot of people looked at Seth, Drew, and Riddle, or Sami Zayn. I think realistically, those four all had storylines with interesting cash-in opportunities and stories to go along with the cash-in. Obviously, Seth trying to recreate WrestleMania 31 at SummerSlam. Drew McIntyre, he cashes in at Clash of the Castle. Maybe he makes it a triple threat at SummerSlam. Or maybe he cashes in at SummerSlam, so he's the champion going into the UK show. Or Riddle, Riddle can't. I know WWE is teasing this whole thing where, the Money in the Bank, if he wins Money in the Bank, he can get back to Roman, but he can't challenge for the title as long as Roman's the champion. So I'm not sure how Money in the Bank would get around that, because he would still be cashing in on Roman Reigns. So maybe Brock beats Roman, and then Riddle cashes in on Lesnar and becomes a champion, and then that sets up a rematch with Roman Reigns. Riddle goes over Roman, and then you can move on with Roman and get him ready for The Rock for WrestleMania. But then you add Theory to the match last second, and it's just kind of like, okay, now you can't even do anything with those four, because at least, again, and I go back, and again, I count Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn says, hey, I want to win that briefcase to protect Roman Reigns. I want to protect him from that cash in. You could have had the Usos come out and help Sami Zayn win the Money in the Bank. And then you could have built up if you wanted to do a long term, you could have built up this long term storyline where Sammy, maybe Sammy gets tired. Maybe Sammy gets disrespected by the bloodline, even though he's Mr. Money in the Bank, and he's protecting Roman being cashing in on by not cashing in, and then finally, after being disrespected enough, he finally cashes in. Theory. Again, I think just personally for me, I think it just killed the excitement for the match. I was excited for the match. You could have realistically. I could throw in Sheamus and make it 5 there. You could have had something with Sheamus. Sheamus cashed in on Roman Reigns in 2015 and won the title. So you even had a little backstory there. And Sheamus is a good worker, and putting Sheamus there against Roman would have been somebody different. It would have been different from the typical face versus heel dynamic. And again, WWE pretty much dismissed half their roster when Roman Reigns was like, "Oh, bring in everyone." Okay, AJ Styles, Lashley, who is now the U.S. champion, which I think if WWE wants to push Theory, they should have kept the U.S. title on Theory instead of having Lashley win the title. I think that's kind of where the only bad booking I think the two biggest the worst booking decisions for Money in the Bank. Theory losing the U.S. title and Theory winning Money in the Bank. I think you could have built him up for a year. Give him another year. Let him have the U.S. title for a year. And then you do something with Money in the Bank next year with him. Obviously, now my prediction of Theory versus Cena at SummerSlam is not going to happen because they've already announced that Theory is getting a U.S. title rematch at SummerSlam. So that tells me John Cena's not going to be at SummerSlam. Unless they have other plans unless there's other plans for Cena, but it does seem as if Cena's not going to be in Money at SummerSlam. So that kind of goes into the rumor that Cena, in theory, is going to be saved for WrestleMania. I think the big thing for me is that Theory hasn't developed enough as a character. I think this isn't a Seth Rollins or an Edge situation where he's a young guy on the cusp of being that main eventer, and that briefcase is going to get him over the edge, no pun intended, and is going to get him up to that main event level. I think even if you look at him as the next John Cena, obviously the Money in the Bank was not around until after John Cena had already won the WWE Championship. So, John Cena won the WWE Championship the night of the first Money in the Bank match. But the point being is this: Cena at least spent some time in the mid card. His character was allowed to develop, and it developed in a way where he was then kind of pushed into that main event scene. He wasn't quite there, but he was allowed to kind of work with Undertaker, work with Brock Lesnar, work with work with Big Show, people that were in the main event around 2002, 2003, where he had time to develop his character, get him to that point to where he was ready to be that top guy when he beat JBL at WrestleMania and became the WWE champion. Theory is just not at that point to where you could realistically put the Money in the Bank contract on him now and say, hey, here we go, he's our guy. I just can't see them spending all this time on Roman Reigns just to have Brock Lesnar or Theory Brock Lesnar win a SummerSlam, and then Theory cashes in on Lesnar, or Theory cashes in at some cashes in, and then Theory loses the briefcase, or something to the effect of just pulling that trigger too soon. And I get what people are saying is that, hey, it's a new star. WWE needs to invest in younger talent, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. When you look up, I guess, to quote baseball, baseball terminology, when you look up and down that pipeline, WWE, it's not, yeah, there's not a lot of young talent coming up. And so right now, WWE needs to start working on developing the next crop of main eventers. But I think when you push that person too soon, too much, too soon, it only hurts the character. Did they not learn anything from Roman Reigns? Apparently not. Because you see now where Roman Reigns is as a tribal chief, and he was allowed to flourish and finally have this character that people can actually see him as a credible main eventer, credible world champion, as the guy in WWE. But beforehand, it was this forced push, I guess, down our throat, so to speak, which is another term I've heard people say, is that Theory's being pushed down our throat. And I agree and disagree with that, because Theory, to me, he's a great talent you invest in. You gave I think they pulled that trigger on Money in the Bank a little bit too soon, a year too soon, a year early, because you have Cody Rhodes, you have Drew McIntyre, you have Seth Rollins, Riddle, Randy Orton, guys that can realistically and legitimately, that we as fans can say, okay, they can take the title off Roman right now. They can take the title off Roman, and without any issue. Theory, it's kind of like, it's a little too soon, because he hasn't been able to develop, and he's not developed past the whole selfie thing. So, again, I see the good, I see the bad, but I think it's too soon. Let me know in the comments below, did Theory win at the right time? Was it too soon? Comment below. Again, Money in the Bank was a great show. Usos and the Street Profits stole the show. I don't agree with the finish, or doing that type of finish, but I get they need a reason for a rematch, but this is WWE, where they just hand out rematches. So, I don't know. To me, everything about Money in the Bank was absolutely perfect until Theory was added into Money in the Bank, because it just discredits everything when you had all these qualifying matches and Theory never qualified. He was just handed the spot out of nowhere. And again, if you wanted to do a late addition to the match, okay, fine. Make it one of the Usos. Maybe Paul Heyman convinced Adam Pearce to add one of the Usos to the match to try to further protect Roman Reigns. Or, I don't know, maybe they kayfabe Randy Orton's injury and Randy Orton comes out and he wins the briefcase. Or, they're kayfabing Cody's injury, and Cody wins Money in the Bank. And that drives Seth Rollins even more crazier. Like, if you're going to add a last second person into a match, it needs to be something fun. It needs to be like, oh, exciting. It needs to be like a big name. And it's killed the match. If you had just put Theory in the match to begin with and not had him drop the U.S. title, I think that could have actually worked. I could have sat here on my predictions video and said, you know what, Theory, he's been he's Mr. McMahon's chosen one. He's U.S. champion, but you know what? It might be a year too early to give him the briefcase because of Roman Reigns being the champion. So maybe next year, 2023, Mr. Money in the Bank could be Theory. At least that's what I would have said in my predictions video, if he was already in the match. Again, your thoughts below. I've been your host, Money Mike, and I'll be back with more content on this channel, including starting up my NFL discussions as we get closer to the start of training camp, and much more. And much more wrestling news as it comes.